Good morning, everybody. This is Ann Swain of APSCo. It's Friday, the 17th of April, and we're looking to run our question time live to answer the questions that are burning that you have, and actually to post those questions to our panel. I'm very pleased today to be joined by Tania Bowers, who is legal counsel of APSCo and has been a regular panelist on these sessions. But I also have with me today Tom Way, who is the MD of UK and Ireland for a brand leader SThree. SThree, you're probably aware of, have around 3,000 employees spread over 16 countries and turn over £1 billion. We also have Phil Scott, who's here from Executive Recruitment Group, who at a different level, maybe a different stage of his growth, he can tell us that, has 10 employees working in the senior financial professional market. And interestingly, with Phil's group of employees, they have for a number of years, since 2015, all worked remotely. We felt that having two companies with different areas of expertise and different spreads in a marketplace could give an opportunity for APSCo members to ask the questions that they need to know the answers to with regard to how survive and indeed thrive through this coronavirus scenario. I do have a number of questions coming through. I'm asking everyone to put their questions through the chat line, so that should be an easy thing to do. It will be on your screens. If you go through chat, it will save me from looking at questions all over the place, and I will endeavour within this hour to get most of your questions through. What I would say is, with the experience that we've had of running these, people are slow to start asking, and then we get a huge flurry of activity toward the end, which may mean your question won't have time to be answered. So go for it. Ask anything that you need to ask, and let's see if our panel members have some ideas and some opportunities to share with you by way of answering them. Why don't I get in pretty quickly? We always have on these sessions a number of questions, as you can imagine, on the furloughing scheme. And bear with me if I do go straight to a few of those, but we're also going to ask our APSCo member panelists about their experience within their business. So let me get straight on to some of these furlough questions. Any advice on what we say as a business to people on furlough who ask what happens at the end of May? Tania, let me come to you. Have we had any guidance on what's likely to happen at the end of May?
No, the government hasn't, to my knowledge, given an indication of whether it intends to extend the scheme beyond the end of May, and they're probably unlikely to do so for a good few weeks, I would think, and then the pressure will mount. In terms of what to tell people on furlough, I think you can just be open with them that that's the situation, that obviously at the end of May, the company will have to consider their position, whether to bring them back to work, short-term hours. Obviously, they hope the furlough will be extended, or depending on how you want to present this, but you know, obviously, is there still a job open? But obviously we hope that the furlough will be extended if people still aren't able to work.
Yeah, I mean, the government have been open from the word go that if they feel that it needs to be extended, they would do it, haven't they?
Yes, I think so, yes. Yeah, I mean, it's the hospitality sector, isn't it, that is really at a complete shutdown at the moment, where there will be, you know, a very significant loss of jobs very quickly, I would imagine.
Yeah, I don't know about me, but I can only just hear you. I don't know if you can turn your microphone up a little bit.
Well,
that might help everybody out there. I don't know if it's just me, but I just thought I'd ask that. I'm going to put this one to you before I come to my other panelists, because it's not a furlough question. At the moment, our furloughed workers have access to all of our systems. Should employers remove that access? Tania?
I think, is this better sound-wise?
Much better, yeah, much better.
Okay. Well, it's the one way of making sure they don't continue to deliver services for you, isn't it, by removing access to the systems? I mean, obviously somebody else needs to look at their emails, etc. But it is the one way of ensuring they're not doing any work.
Yeah. If I come to the panelists, Tom, look, you've got 3,000 staff, and I know they're spread across the world. Have you taken up an opportunity to furlough anybody at SThree?
Hi, Anne. So yeah, we're currently in the process of looking at all of the different sort of government assistance programs globally. And I think that the nuances between them are sort of quite extreme. So if you look at just the difference between the UK and Ireland, for example, they're very, very different schemes. We've got a large business in America, and the options there differ by state. And obviously you've got the different laws around being at will if you were wanting to make sort of full-time decisions on staff sort of far easier. So we're at a point where we're still considering sort of our options, and obviously the associated risks that come with that. Obviously one that was just highlighted there around the use of IT systems when people are on furlough. And particularly given that they are going to be at home during that time, there's probably heightened risk that they might dip into their IT systems if they have nothing else to do. So I think that's certainly a consideration that we have at the moment, is that if we choose to furlough, assessing the risk medium term, I think is sort of our primemost priority. In certain countries, I think we're making decisions not to look at the sort of government assistance programs. So I think in Germany, for example, we're not going to look at them. I think in countries like France, where they're incredibly favourable, I think UK government are looking at 2.5k worth of sort of salary. In France, they're looking at €6,500. So it's a very, very different scheme. So I think, yeah, just taking a sort of global snapshot, and then if we choose to do so, trying to make sure that we communicate that consistently is our view at the moment.
Fair enough. Are you feeling that the UK's opportunities, the furlough scheme, for instance, and the SIBLs, the business loan, the interruption loan schemes and things, in having a look at those, do you feel comparatively to other countries around the world that we've been relatively generous?
I think the furlough scheme, if it's extended beyond May, makes it more generous. I think that if it's not extended beyond May, and this is my personal opinion rather than the view of SThree, is that it's very much a kicking of the can exercise, which is sort of preventing sort of longer term workforce optimization measures. If it's extended beyond May, particularly for some of those sort of sectors that were highlighted by Tania and so forth, then it might allow sort of recovery time for us for people to make longer term decisions. But I think that if it's not extended beyond May, then a number of companies we'd be looking to redundancy sort of far quicker than they would if it was extended.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, we know from Carolyn Fairbairn from the CBI speaking about if people are going to make large scale redundancies, then they need to give 45 days minimum notice. And that kind of starts looking like tomorrow for some big businesses. So the government, I think, do need to start hurrying up and making a decision about extension. Tania, do you think they will hurry up and make a decision about it?
I think their priority, if I'm honest, I suspect, is just getting that first payroll done. I think that's a huge challenge for them. On the 23rd of April, I think it is, a week, they're going to have thousands of businesses, probably all simultaneously, applying for the furlough grants. So my gut feeling is that's probably their priority for the next week or so. And from a policy perspective, I mean, all the news in the papers is about extending the SIBL scheme, the business interruption loan, to larger companies. It's about continuing to push to try and get better access to those loans. That seems to be the policy focus at the moment, rather than the extension of the JRS.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder whether that needs a change of policy to have more access, or just another kick up the backside of the banks that seem to have not been particularly open to handing money out.
Yeah, they're looking, aren't they, the loans being 100% government backed, like they are in other countries such as Germany, which means the banks don't have to worry, so to speak, about whether the debt's good.
Yeah, I think it's fair enough. Phil, if I come to you, have you looked at furloughing? Have you looked at the Sybil scheme or any of the government sort of backed offers that are out there?
So we've definitely used furlough. We've got 10 recruiters, 6 are on furlough, and then so we've got 4 covering the vacancies that are coming in, plus myself getting back on the tools, and then with 2 in admin and one is on furlough, and we've kept marketing going. So we're keeping the wheels turning, but there certainly isn't enough in our business, to keep everyone going. In terms of funding, we've not really looked at any funding. We're quite light as a business in terms of all our staff are working remotely, so we haven't got the big office costs that some of the bigger companies have. So we've managed to sort of build up a little bit of a buffer. I suppose what we would have been spending in offices, we've kept in the business. So we can manage the cash. For a period of time as it is.
Well, that's a good place to be, actually, isn't it? I've got another question on furloughing, and then I'm going to move away from furloughing for a while, but bear with me with this one. Does anyone have any experience of non-UK companies with UK PAYE schemes using furlough? Tania, any experience of that? Do we understand that side of the market?
I haven't had any direct queries on that, but who can claim? You must have created and started a UK PAYE payroll scheme on or before 19th March. So as long as you fit that criteria and the other criteria, then I think you can claim.
Okay, I think that's absolutely right. There's always queries, and we've had a couple here now, on furloughed workers and annual leave. How does it work? And I'm guessing the understanding, this is not about agency or umbrella furloughed workers. This is about those working within a recruitment company. How does somebody acquire, do they acquire and build up their annual leave scenario? Tania?
Yes, they do. They continue to have their employment rights, one of which is holiday leave, so they continue to accrue holiday. The government's amended working time regulations a few weeks ago so that holiday can be carried over into 2 subsequent leave years if it's not possible to take it this year because of COVID absence. We are getting a few questions, and there's not a clear answer on this as of yet, apart from something on the HMRC web chat about whether you can make people take annual leave during furlough. The HMRC web chat answer was that you can, as long as you top up the holiday pay to 100%, so that whilst they're on holiday, they get paid 100%. But we're still awaiting guidance on holiday pay from BAYS, which is being written.
So once that is written, what will APSCo do about making sure members get it, the advice?
Well, obviously we communicate everything in your daily bite size. We pretty much turn it around straight away in terms of putting it on the website and then doing our own guidance on it with a slant towards the industry. Yeah.
Okay. Let me come on to running a business in difficult times. We do at APSCo lots of research, and some of the figures that we've put out just actually only yesterday are looking at figures from Cube 19, one of our great friends and a member, is looking that we're finding perm vacancies overall down about 53%, and that's last week on the same week in 2019, and contract requirements down 42%. Tom, if you look at SThree's figures in the UK, is that sort of fairly reflective of the figures that you're seeing within the business?
No, actually, I think they look quite a bit more favourable, to be honest. I think certainly in the STEM sectors that we are operating in at the moment on perm, I think we saw in the initial stages quite a lot halted quite quickly as companies were sort of mobilising themselves to work from home. And then I've seen one of the questions on the chat here, what are clients' approaches to interviewing and onboarding permanent candidates when interviewing them remotely? What we've seen over the last 2 weeks is those perm jobs levels rise, as clients have now got new policies around their ability to, one, make a decision without meeting the candidate physically, and two, being able to remotely onboard them through the use of technology. So I think if you're to look at the snapshot of the perm job drop off in job flow, it was very different in the first 2 weeks as it has been in the last 2 weeks. On contract, sort of a consistent sort of drop off in job flow, but what we're not seeing is any real consistency across sectors. So I think it's interesting. You would imagine that sort of our view was that sort of public sector and life sciences would remain most resilient, just by nature of what they do. But interesting, we've still seen a sort of continued placements made in sort of engineering and power, as well as sort of IT, public sector, and life sciences. So at the moment, we are finding it very difficult to say that we're seeing any real sectoral impact. We're saying it's more client driven than sector driven at the moment, is our view.
That's interesting, isn't it? So the figures that we've got, again, and certainly if we look from a London point of view, and these are from a different source actually, is that 35% of all requirements out there are in the tech space, which is obviously pretty high. Marketing has about 11%. There's been a bit of a boost in HR requirements, and that's mainly about engagement, staff engagement specialists, and you can see why that might be happening. Pretty obviously a huge collapse in anything that's non-food retail oriented, and in real estate and construction markets seem to be a little bit dodgy, and more dodgy than we might have think when we see there are construction sites still going. Phil, what about you in the finance sector? What are you seeing is happening? Or is it not sectorial in the financial sector?
I'd agree with Tom. I'd quite be happy with those figures, to be honest. It's dropped off massively. I mean, in finance and HR, yes, you can onboard remotely because finance you're looking at a set of numbers, so that can be done. But a lot of companies are just put a lot of things on hold while they just try and feed the employees they've currently got. So yeah, it has dropped off considerably. We are seeing stuff where we're seeing movement at the minute tends to be tech and care sector. We seem to be getting inquiries from the care sector as well. So I suppose they've still got the same numbers to care for. So there's not much change there. But all the other sectors, hospitality, etc., they've obviously grind to a halt.
Which makes sense. So are your consultants that you've kept, and Tom, it's all of yours, but Phil, less so. Are they keeping busy? Can they make money for you, Phil?
Yeah, they've got. We've managed to obviously contract the workforce to meet the size of vacancies coming through. So we have, I was looking at this morning. Everybody's got something to work on, including myself. So it's just managing those processes and making sure that they are going to interview remotely and make offers and potentially on board. And it's like Tom said, some of the companies are not interested in doing that. Some of them will. So when lockdown finishes, I think that'll help in terms of maybe a lot of companies have got processes to final interview, with that final interview being maybe face-to-face after lockdown. So that will help for the companies that are sticking to face-to-face interview policy.
Yeah, Tom, from the point of view of your consultants, are you finding there's enough work for them to be working on?
Yeah, so I think obviously jobs per head as a key metric are significantly down. I guess from our perspective, the focus has very much shifted more on sort of inputs than necessarily the outputs. And I think that obviously being in a position where we do, obviously working for a bigger company with a reasonable cash reserve, we are able to be a little bit more patient around our sort of short-term decision making on these staff. But a lot of the work that we're focused on at the moment is what will the bounce back look like when lockdown measures are restricted. So just as an example there, I think my view is that the government will extend the key workers into sectors that can start to bring the economy sort of back moving again. So for example, in Germany this week, they announced that they wanted to get the automotive sector back up and running as one of the biggest sectors in Germany, which has immediately led to sort of manufacturers going back to business, plants starting to sort of reopen and so forth. And so if they did the same in the UK, you'd probably see sort of manufacturing sites reopen quite quickly, probably with a degree of social distancing. We'd probably see sort of construction sites being allowed to sort of return to work with a certain degree of social distancing. And that would probably have an impact on all sectors. So at the moment, we're keeping people busy with sort of inputs, but where they don't have live jobs, then staying close to customers to try and understand how will they react when lockdown measures are restricted, even if they're only very sort of small lockdown lifts. What can we do to start to try and predict that if you're allowed to bring people back with a degree of social distancing, what does that mean for your sort of your staffing, your view on staffing, your view on hiring and so forth. So it's a different busy.
Yeah, I mean, I do think a lot of the organisations out there, our end user customers, but also recruitment companies, are going to be using some of this time to have a real look at their business and what is the business that they would like to come out of this market with, or certainly start changing to future scope it. And I do think a lot of our customer bases will be different businesses in 2 years' time because of this crisis. And what about the recruitment market? Phil, are you learning anything from this crisis that means you might make different decisions moving forward with structuring the company?
I mean, if I'm honest, the 2008 recession, I did a lot of learning in that. So we brought things forward from there in trying to keep as much things lean or flexible. So whether any suppliers that we use, we've always tried to keep very flexible arrangements so that we're not tied into long contracts operationally. But on a sales side, we're learning all the time, really. It's sort of, I think, if I'm honest, where we're probably, what I'd like to have had is maybe a lot more data to be able to dissect and dip into certain sectors. There's obviously a focus on various sectors that are moving, and maybe our data is not quite in a position for us. I'm sure I'm not alone. Every recruitment company would like data a lot neater, but if we had it a lot neater, we could probably get into certain markets a little bit quicker and identify those and communicate with those markets. So that's really a learn, I suppose, for us is how important it is that when there's different peaks and troughs in any time, not just in the recession, and when you want to have a focus on a market, you've got to have the data there ready. And I would say that ours is there, but it's probably 80% of what I would have liked.
Yeah. Tom, if I come to you on that, I know SThree does look at data and information and makes some good long-term plans and tends to be a business that knows where it wants to be going and how to get there. Are you rejigging as a business the direction of the company because of this? Not just the budget forecast, but ways of doing things and ways of structuring or growing the business? Is it making you look at things like that?
Yeah, to a degree. I think that we certainly think that internally our vision and our position is to be at the centre of STEM and flexible working, which I think we're quite excited about being able to bounce back from this. Obviously, the biggest consideration, like for all companies at the moment, is how deep is this going to cut, right? But as and when things do bounce, our view is that flexible working, more so than ever before, will be a customer's sort of priority. Having all been away from the workplace for a period of what could be up to, let's say, 6 months for certain companies, will there be a return to work, sort of 8 till 6, 9 till 5, 5 days a week across any sector or across any industry? And our view is that that is highly unlikely. So the demand for flexible working will ever increase. So I think that speaks to the strength of contract. That speaks to the strength of looking at, dare I say, sort of people as a service, and so forth, rather than sort of more contingent perm-based solutions. So I think that's our view on the future of work, which obviously is a discussion that's been going on a long time. But I think from a sector perspective, I think what will get us through and out of this situation are the STEM sectors. And I think we're obviously in the UK, we're very well positioned and lucky to be at the heart of STEM in the UK. And I think a review of the industrial strategy, Anne, which I know that you've always been quite close to, is probably quite a good time to sort of lead us to where the opportunities might be for us in those STEM sectors in the future.
Yeah, I think that's right. Phil, I've had a question that's really more directed to you, and that's regarding remote working and remote working teams. Did you encounter any initial stumbles when you began fully remote working teams? This person said their business partner wants to roll this out, but they have a concern, which is in terms of onboarding newcomers or people with low experience. How do you get them to understand the way to work when you've got pretty much everybody else working from home? Phil, how has that worked for you?
So we actually set up. We didn't have an office workforce that we then relocated out to working from home. We recruited initially. So onboarding is fine. However, we recruit more experienced individuals. So if I'm totally honest, I've never been brave enough to try it on trainees. Potentially I think there is an advantage of getting trainees desk side in person. I'm not saying it cannot be done remotely, but we've not been brave enough to try it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, Tom, at something that's always been a huge strength of SThree, and that's the culture of that business. If you, for instance, got into a stage of having most people working from home, do you think it will be difficult to take on the kind of trainees that you take and give them the experience set, but also give them the culture of SThree? Could it work for SThree or not really?
I think that's a key question that we're working through at the moment. I think that if you're hiring trainees, then I think our view is that you need to be mindful of what they're doing from home. If they don't have they might have the available technology, but do they have the toolkit and the experience to speak to customers and meet customers and clients remotely, if they haven't been sort of trained or upskilled on the job? So I think our position at the moment is that we're not recruiting trainees at the moment. And our view at the moment is that we won't onboard trainees remotely, because we still feel that that sort of time spent working and observing teams and the culture and being there sort of close to their manager physically is a hugely important part of their development as a consultant. Outside of that, I think what this has shown us as a company that has often been known as sort of pretty strict and pretty regimented around about the hours that people keep in the office. We've shown that within, like a lot of companies, within the space of 2 weeks, our entire workforce is now remote, and we've been able to provide somebody with a laptop in the space of 2 weeks, which is something that we've been unable to do in 33 years. And so that has to be a key consideration for the future. And I think, just like anyone, that it does throw up questions around the need for office space in the future. Which again is probably a conversation that was certainly not one being had at a boardroom table at SThree, if any place, sort of 6 months ago, but I'm sure will be a topic of conversation moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's right. Phil, can you give our members out there perhaps a few things that has made the fact that your team do work from home or work remotely a success story? What can APSCo members do now with people working from home that would make it easier and better for them that you've been learning for years?
I think it's getting the structure right. Try to replicate what they get in the office, but still leave it. Still leave a little bit of time for them to do their job. So you can have the meetings virtually. You can still have the one-to-ones. I mean, for us, I think when we've taken people, it's getting the profile right of the individual that's going to be successful from home. So we had to adapt because my previous life was, wasn't remote working recruiters. It was in the office. So we've adapted the personality profiling with a more emphasis on independence that maybe we wouldn't have placed emphasis previously. Sociability, funny enough, we always had pretty high, but we've now low. It needs to be more medium. They need to be sociable to be in recruitment, but they need to be comfortable in their own company really as well. So, and then we put a lot of emphasis now on the verbal reasoning test, which is the problem solving, because they have to be able to work things out for themselves as well. So I think it is getting the profiling right for new staff, but adapting as many as as your current processes as you can, so they don't become disengaged with the company. So they still need as much face-to-face contact, and we meet up we have an annual conference as well, so that everyone's actually does meet their colleagues face-to-face rather than just virtually, at least once a year. And we do have get-togethers on a regional basis as well, where possible, or across brand, throughout the year. So it's just working out what works for you and the recruiter mix that you've got in, so that they're getting the right amount of engagement, but not too much, because again, depending on the profile of the recruiter, they still want to be left to do the day job as well. They need time to do that.
Fair enough. Okay, a question's come in, which I'm suspecting is really one for me to answer, and I'm happy to answer. The question is this: my firm spends £100,000, I'm assuming annually, split 50-50 between Bullhorn and LinkedIn. They won't negotiate on terms, even though we only are now using 20% of their services. I think APSCo should campaign that software vendors and job boards should support the recruitment industry, their customer base. Okay, let me say something on this. I'm a strong believer that every business and individuals actually will come out of this crisis with a brand, really. And it may be the brand of being difficult to deal with, or the brand of not helping out, or it may be the brand of we've helped our customers, whether that be a recruitment company or a supplier to the recruitment company. We've helped our customers, we've worked within the guidelines for government. We're not making furloughed staff work and all that kind of stuff, but we've worked within the guidelines and the spirit of what's going on out there. And what I would say is this: it is inappropriate, wholly inappropriate, for any trade body or organisation to try and negotiate on behalf of an industry, or even half a dozen different companies, to negotiate on commercial terms. It is not appropriate, and we're illegally not allowed to do it. But weirdly, I've spoken to both of those organisations recently. Bullhorn are great friends of APSCo, and we know them very well. They've been a member from the word go. And actually, I've had a long conversation with the MD of LinkedIn. What I would say, and they're not the same organisation, but there's been some similarities. I think that the initial week when everybody got sent home caused a lot of panic to some people within the recruitment market. Maybe not the big players like SThree, but for a lot of companies, a lot of panic. And what I do think is that people rang their suppliers, whether it be, especially those that license things, whether it be Bullhorn or LinkedIn, that they ran them instantly, spoke to their account manager, which may not be a decision-making person, who asked them about terms, who put them through to the finance department, whose only response was ever going to be, you need to pay your bill on time and in full. And I think that sometimes companies, and LinkedIn said this to me actually only this week, that maybe they weren't quick enough in organising a kind of corporate level response to their customers that can go a long way to helping the situation. In fact, LinkedIn got very tied up with doing some very big projects, one of which was about helping the NHS actually, and it was a big, fairly all-encompassing scenario. And I think what it's meant is that a number of people in trying to negotiate with LinkedIn hit a bit of a brick wall. I can guarantee that that brick wall has softened because they came a little bit late to recognise, and people came a bit too early to try and negotiate something, that there's been some understanding there that there will be some level of flexibility. So what I would say with both organisations, and I think I would imagine with Bullhorn there's always been some level of flexibility actually, but if we were so quick off the mark, I think they weren't able to get all their ducks in a row with giving the power to different people within that business to negotiate terms that had been signed on contract basis. So what my view would be is, one, I think both organisations are trying to help the recruitment market. Okay, I don't know that either of them will say their initial response was as quick as it might have been or as positive to the recruitment market. I think in both cases it's been a bit accidental, that actually. And I think it's easy to forgive that. I would say if you are having problems and you're using 20% of a service that you want, talk to them both now. Talk to them both now and see what can be done. But let me tell you something, they are businesses in the same way that we are. And where we don't want customers to say, I'm not paying for my contractors anymore, or actually the credit terms that I signed, I'm not going to fulfill for you anymore. In the same way as we don't want that, you can imagine that suppliers to us can't afford to have us doing that either. So my view is, speak to your account manager. If you need to escalate, escalate, but do it on a basis that we're all in the same scenario and we're all businesses that I guarantee will try and help you out where they can. Okay, so that's a different story from last week. Certainly the big focus was on LinkedIn. I hadn't heard very much about Bullhorn, but I know Bullhorn have been helping people only this week, actually. I know for sure because I've had conversations that have been sorted out prior to me actually getting around to having the conversations with Bullhorn. But I also know that LinkedIn are open for discussion, but they're a business too. And this is a global scenario and they're dealing with it multiple times with multiple customers around the whole world. So in some ways it's good timing that that's questions happened now. It wasn't APSCo or anybody else's position to start bollocking suppliers or actually slashing contractual business terms that you have negotiated directly with them. And we didn't do that, but we asked for some assistance. The good thing, it was there already to be had. Okay, so you can imagine the panic demands and the panic answers haven't helped anybody in this. Try again now. That's what I would say. Tania, do you have anything to say with regard to competition law and anything that's worth noting in that?
You mean in respect of us?
Well, in respect of us and perhaps what my reasons are fairly bona fide for not trying to kind of dive in and negotiate everyone's terms, but also people that have signed contracts with suppliers.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is, you know, we as an industry live by our contracts, don't we? We live by our contracts with our clients and our contractors and our suppliers, and ditto the same for those suppliers linked in. I mean, contract law is still live and kicking, and the problem is, you know, very often you didn't think you had that great terms in the first place, so they look even worse now with your key suppliers. But I think good advice to try and channel and get access where you can to the key people. And I think that's always the problem, isn't it? It's getting through to the decision makers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just one thing to add to that, and I think that certainly with LinkedIn, I think they've been sort of very proactive with us, and I'd encourage everybody that uses LinkedIn as a service to reach out to them for all of the other associated services that they're offering at this time outside of what you maybe have signed up to. So, for example, they put on a really interesting webinar this week with an ex-Navy SEAL talking about leading through crisis. I don't know if anybody attended that, but I got the UK leadership team in SThree to listen into that, who all took a lot from it. They'll do any form of training to you or your teams on any of the products that they currently have that maybe that you wouldn't have had time to do in more normalized market conditions. So I think reaching out to your account manager at LinkedIn and asking them for all of the available training, all of the available sort of support that they can give you outside just the use of their platform is now a very, very good time to do so, because I think they, like us, will be sweating that they'll want the continuation of these relationships in the future and are having to prove their worth too. That's certainly what I'm feeling.
Yeah, I think that's right. What we found from most of the members that have been sort of complaining, let's say, about LinkedIn is really it's the financial stuff they need to sort out, whether it's a gap in their license or an extended license period, or bringing down the numbers of licensees to match the staff they've got at the minute is the first consideration. Some people have been frustrated that they've been offered subsidiary things when really it's the money, and cash is king obviously at the minute where they need something, but it's been a delayed reaction for certain reasons, and we've been quick to make demands, I think. Okay, let me get on to some of these other questions. Something sort of to do with furlough, but a different one, and we've not had this before. So to Tania, really, we have had some people recently let go for non-COVID related reasons. They've come to us now that the furlough scheme has opened and asked to be placed on furlough as it's clearly unlikely they're going to find another job, and that they would be eligible with regard to their timeframes. And so consequently, should we be doing this? Do we need to treat everybody the same in that way if we do it for some? And the last part, numerous parts of the question.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of questions.
Should we be doing it? Tania.
Well, the scheme's called the Job Retention Scheme. So on the face of it, it feels like there should be a job at the end of it, potentially, all other things being equal. However, in the guidance, it clearly says if you made employees redundant, question mark whether that was for whether it's implied it was for COVID-19 reasons, sort of a shock reaction, or they stopped working for you on or after 28th February 2020, you can re-employ them, put them on furlough. If they were, so that, I think that is one of the questions. It's now the 19th of March. So it depends when they were on your RTI return, I think, firstly. Depends when you let them go. I do think there's a slight risk if you let them go for non-COVID reasons that you're re-employing them, and there's never a job at the end of it. But the scheme is about keeping people out of the benefit system. But if you do re-employ them, then they're back on your, you've got the contract. You'd need to pay them another notice period. Yes, of course, they'd be entitled to annual leave, just like any other employees. So you probably could do it, but if there genuinely isn't a job, I'm not sure about whether I would. Also, I think it's difficult if you want to pick and choose people. It's always best to apply objective criteria in these situations.
Yeah, I agree with you. The last part of this question, and some of them were about holidays and crewing and all of this kind of stuff, and notice period. Do we need to employ them after the furlough period?
Well, a business will have a decision to make after the furlough period as to whether there is a job or not. But then you would need to give them notice. You would need to terminate them lawfully again. So you would slightly be starting from scratch. As to whether there's continuity of employment, you'd also have to look at that depending on the gap.
Okay, so our view realistically is, look, you can do this, but it's not in the spirit of what the government are trying to do, which is retain people in jobs, the job that they were in. And if you've made them redundant and it doesn't sound like there's going to be a job at the end of it, this is really not the scheme. This is not the way this scheme has been intended to be set up. I suppose what you are doing is giving somebody an income when it is difficult to find another job probably at the minute. But you need to look at doing it. Can it get complicated? Yes, it can. Be careful of doing this. It's not quite as simple as somebody asking to be re-employed may think it is. Couple of questions again, Tania. Can my furlough staff still interact on LinkedIn as a representative of our company? Their LinkedIn is a personal account, not a company account. So they're not technically using a company resource.
We've had this before, haven't we? Our view is it's risky because the question is whether they're actually delivering a service to you. And on the face of it, the framing of that question sounds like, yes, they are delivering a service for you because they're keeping in touch with people on behalf of the company. Yeah,
it's difficult, isn't it? We took the decision not to furlough employees until the 1st of April. However, our fees just stopped from mid-March. Are we able to claim half of March salaries through the HMR coronavirus job retention scheme? Can they claim a little bit sort of back pay for the 2 weeks that they didn't officially put people on furlough?
I think if they were working during that period, then no, they can't. I think that's the key criteria. Were they, irrespective of whether there was much work to do, if they were working during that period, then no.
I think that's absolutely right. No, they can't. And it would be difficult to prove someone wasn't working if they were sending emails and trying to actually obtain revenue on behalf of the business. What's the impact of the date change from the 28th of February to the 19th of March with regard to the government scheme? What's the difference between that, Tania?
Well, the scheme was announced, I think, on the 20th. It's to capture people that effectively fell through the gap of starting new jobs, in that 19-day period, because they wouldn't have been on the payroll on the 28th of February. So it's to capture more people into the scheme.
But it does make a huge difference, does it? Because of course it's when you're on the payroll, which generally in our markets would be a monthly payroll. People don't get put on that payroll till pretty much just before you're going to run it, do they?
Yeah, I do think that is going to be an issue, particularly for agency workers, because in the guidance issued on Wednesday, I think it was, they've made clear that you can only claim for employees that were on your PAYE payroll on or before 19th March and which were notified to HMRC on an RTI submission on or before 19th March. So I mean that might technically exclude people, that clarification about the need for an RTI submission.
Yeah. Here's a question about someone on probation. Bear with me, guys, I'm going to come back to you, but these are sort of Tania-oriented ones, I think, at the moment. What do we do about a person whose probation ended whilst they were furloughed? Do we extend? Can we extend beyond the usual 3 to 6 months extension?
Well, the contract of employment continues. So my view is, yes, you should, you can extend furlough, but you need to do what you would normally do, which is formally extend it. Not furlough, I'm sorry, probation. I don't think there's any maximum length of a probation. I suppose you need to think about if they're disadvantaged, if it goes on for months and months, if they've got less entitlement whilst they're on probation, there is that to consider. But
yeah, and there's a question: can we confirm that Bays have said that they will give some guidance with regard to holiday? Until now, that it feels like they've been avoiding the issue. So actually, are they likely to give some guidance? Are we expecting it, Tania?
we are told twice a week by employment agency standards they are working on guidance. I think technically it's difficult because it's complex and not ideal anyway. They're already working on overhauling holiday leave and pay legislation at some point in the future. So yeah, we are told that they are working on it.
Okay, let me come on to a bit of a future scope to see what our panel members are doing to prepare themselves, still coming through this crisis, but out of the other side. Tom, can I come to you? Have you made plans for coming out of the other side? Are there new markets you're going into? Are you going to fill a revenue void with different services on offer? What are you doing at SThree to come out the other end of this?
Yeah, so I think everybody, I think we tried to steer the conversation today away from furlough where possible, and I think that everybody at the moment is way down deep in obviously furloughing staff. I think phase 2 around that will then be sort of workforce optimization for a number of companies, maybe more permanently. But I think what we're trying to do at SThree is really try and look at 2021 and think, right, going into next year, are we offering the right services? Are we sanity checking the sectors and those associated with STEM like we want to be in? And are we trying to sort of look at where there could be a bounce in the economy and how well placed are we to sort of take it when that happens? So I think that there's two camps, right? And at SThree, and as well, given the size of the organisation, we have the looking at the government assistance programmes working on one project scheme, but then there's another team of people looking at what is our ability to bounce back when things are lifted. And I think I'd encourage everyone to sort of make sure that they do spend time thinking about both, because it's very, very easy to get stuck thinking about the first one of these. And for a lot of people, I'm sure on the call, I think we've already heard about examples around 2008, 2009, thinking back to that point and thinking, right, what had we wished we had done differently to set ourselves up back for the bounce, rather than sort of getting sort of constantly sort of drowned in what we're doing with our sort of fixed costs. And that's not to say that we shouldn't be focusing on those. Of course we have to, but it's important, I think, to take a medium and longer term view on this as well, because I think that will help certainly the engagement of the employees and those that you want to keep, that there is a plan for when things change. And if there is an absence of a plan, I think then people will sort of question whether or not they want to sort of be on the journey with all of these organisations.
Yeah, thank you. Phil, what's your view as a smaller business? What kind of plans are you making at the moment for coming out of the other side?
Similar to Tom, really. I mean, we went in defence mode and looked at the here and now to make sure we didn't that we're not stemming too many losses. But we're looking at 2021. We're actually still potentially hiring staff into the business if the right individuals are available, which sounds crazy, and we won't be paying massive salaries, but that's with a 2021 focus. So we have got some reserves. We need to keep them, there available to see us through the end of the year, but we don't want to cripple the business and cut too deep, so when it does return, we've actually got no workforce to handle any business. So it's balancing the three things: the sort of the here and now, paying the bills, the middle period of coming out of furlough, because obviously your salaries are going to spike and vacancies might not spike in the same direction with them. And then again, looking at what do we want the business to look like in 2021, and we don't want it to look smaller than than it has been going into this dilemma. So yeah, it's a big conundrum, really, but it's just all about your cash flow and allocating your cash and reserves to the right areas, the short, medium, and and long term.
Thank you. Can I ask you, and then I'm going to come on to Tom, which will probably bring us to a close. We've mentioned a few times in this discussion, bounce back. How would you personally think, I mean, and this is just, you know, us coming up with our own ideas, really. What do you think a bounce back is likely to look like? Is it going to be the very heavyweight, leather, wet football of the history? Or is it going to be the lighter weight, easy to sky it when you're taking a free kick, football bounce? What are we looking like, do you think?
I think a lot of people are forecasting a sharp bounce back, or they are if we come out of this quickly. Personally, I see a gradual bounce back. As they phase certain industries back, they'll start moving and fueling the economy. So I do see it being gradual between now and, well, between the end of lockdown and probably late autumn. Yeah, I think it's going to be gradual personally. And it's just, for us as a business, it's just managing our costs with that in mind. I'm not sort of kidding myself that it's just going to bounce back in 2 months and revenues are going to be there, because that would be pretty naive. So planning for the worst and hoping for the best, really.
Okay, Tom, let me come to you. What do you think a bounce back is likely to look like? We won't hold you to this, but what's your view?
Yeah, I think that you can already see where there's certain resilience amongst certain sectors. And I think that if they're resilient now, then the likelihood is that they will continue to thrive through this and coming out of it. I think the bounce will come, like I say, I think there'll probably be a decent bounce in areas like construction, manufacturing, certain areas of engineering, and so forth, when restrictions on lockdown are lifted. My view is, I think we'll be in a certain period of lockdown until early autumn. So I think that certain areas of the economy will be brought back to work, but that things like pubs and restaurants and hospitality services and so forth will not reopen. So you will be allowed to go to your place of work and back again, but you will not be able to sort of do anything outside of that is what I think will happen. So again, I think for all of the businesses out there, really looking at the sectors that you serve and trying to do as much research, and we've talked about the use of data, trying to make your decisions through data is imperative, and then sort of thinking how agile you can be based on the sectors that you operate in, but also on the services that you offer. I think that's going to be key as well. Like I say, I think that the way in which we work is something that will remain permanent, right? Ultimately, the economy will get back to the point where it was, but the way in which people will work in the future, I think, will ultimately be changed. And I think gearing up for that is imperative. Yeah.
Can I ask you, do you think that being a huge organisation at a time like this, pretty obviously, if it's well run, and SThree is, has the financial weight to survive the crisis? But do you think being in a big company makes it more difficult to be agile in order to readjust the processes to come out the other side fighting on all fronts than it would be a smaller business?
I think, yes, probably in some cases, yes, in some cases, no. I think the one luxury that we have, obviously at SThree, for example, is that we have legal, HR and finance counsel in each of our countries. So access to information and data is something that we're able to get very, very quickly and internally. But for example, if we just wanted to pull out of a certain country, for example, because we didn't think that country was going to pull through, the sort of financial and sort of longer term impact of that is much more difficult given the size and number of people involved. But I think given the way that we're set up, both being sort of sector led and brand led, it's a good test of how agile we're able to be. But making sure, like I say, that any decisions that we made are led through sort of data-driven decisions rather than sort of anecdotally. And I think, like Phil said, if you haven't got that right data, you shouldn't be making a decision based on what you've read in the paper or what you've heard on a on a call like this. To be honest, if you haven't got the data to back it up, so I think making sure that you have that before any decisions are made is absolutely crucial, and we all should be thinking in the same way.
Do you think, Tom, that this is the time that there will be a growth in startups in the recruitment market? I personally think there will be. I think it might be the biggest year for startups. SThree have lost some great staff and maybe some they wanted to lose by them starting up a business on their own. Is this the time when people in any other company, not particularly SThree, but any other company, are people going to start looking at starting their business now?
I think they absolutely will. I think that people that, whether they leave SThree or any other company, they will be looking at the opportunity that exists within the sector that they know best. I think that that will absolutely happen. And I think from a recruitment sector perspective, I don't think there's going to be many areas of the economy where people will be starting new businesses outside of the life sciences in the current economy, right? But if more recruitment companies are coming to the party because they've maybe been let go of or haven't returned from furlough as a result of it, I think that shows strength of the sector. If I be brutally honest, and we need that, right? We need more and more sort of companies providing that sort of competition and so forth to keep the sector thriving. So I think, yeah, as a result of it, it certainly will. I know sort of ex-colleagues and of mine that are speaking about this as an opportunity now to get into doing something themselves, who have left SThree and moved other places, and they're absolutely thinking that this is actually a good time to start, right? Agreeing new deals on rents and so forth at the moment on a longer term basis is something that they think this is a good time to do so. So yeah, I think there will absolutely be new companies out of this. Will that outweigh the numbers of companies that we lose along the way? I think is a very different question.
Okay, not one I'm going to ask because we are at 12 o'clock. And so our hour, which I feel has gone very quickly, is over. What I would like to do is thank our 3 panel members. Can I thank Tania Bowers? Can I thank Tom? Can I thank Phil for being so open with regard to information about their own business, how they've managed in this, and tips for us to move forward. So thank you for that. Can I just say, I did have a question that I didn't get to about Regis not being very easy to negotiate with, but then I've had another thing come in where somebody said they've had a great deal from Regis, and the advice there is go to the PA of the CEO and you will have some luck. So I had to slide that in because it could really help somebody out there. So thank you for tuning in. I hope this has been useful to you. Thank you so much to our panel members, and stay safe out there. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.